Hi everybody, my name is Hannah and this is Pepper and Pine, and today I want to share with you the reasons why we homeschool. Now, the reasons why we started homeschooling are actually a little bit different than the reasons why we continue to homeschool. I'm going to share all of those reasons with you today, as well as one reason that I have never revealed before. All right, so let me take you back to the beginning, and this is back in 2003 when we started homeschooling. When I talk with people today who are considering homeschooling, some of them, have really tiny babies, some of them are pregnant, some of them don't even have kids yet, and they're already thinking about their children's education. I find that really admirable. And for us, since we were aware of homeschooling, we also had a really great school district, we just kind of waited to the last minute to make a decision, and it was basically based on two things. The first thing was having academic freedom, and at the time I didn't call it academic freedom. I'll tell you what I called it in a little bit, but the other reason was to have more religious content in our homeschool. At this point, I'm going to reveal that one thing that I never really revealed before, and that is that the thought of sending my little child, he was little, well, he wasn't little for his age, he was just little for me. He was my first and he was just my baby. And the thought of sending him off to school just didn't sit well with me. We had practiced attachment parenting up to that point, extended nursing, and a lot of just attachment parenting, co-sleeping, that kind of stuff. And the idea of just all of a sudden not having my son for 3 hours or 6 hours a day and having someone else raise or educate him just didn't sit well with me. I was just a little bit too attached. He probably would have done fine. He might have been a little bit worried the first couple of days of school, like all children are when they go off to school, but I just couldn't send him off. I was just too attached. So that didn't play into, well, I should say that did play into our reasons for homeschooling, but that wasn't a reason that I gave, because that's just something that most parents have, like that little trepidation of, saying goodbye to their student or their child, and then there may be tears with that child, and then you feel like your heartstrings are being pulled, but that's just not a reason to homeschool or to not send your child to school. Usually a child gets over that pretty quickly, but in my heart, I just felt like I just couldn't let him go. Now, the academic freedom, I used to not call it academic freedom because I didn't really know. I just kind of came about that term more recently. But at the time, I felt like I wanted more control over his academics. And at the time, I was being reintroduced to Waldorf education and the Waldorf philosophy. And there was a school nearby, both a public and a private Waldorf school, and both just weren't going to work out for us, either for distance, for cost, or just because I didn't want my child to go away to school. And so the idea of doing that at home was really appealing. But it was a lot more challenging than I expected, and we didn't really find our Waldorf stride for many years. We did do as much as we could, but since we were homeschooling through our county district, we were given a lot of supplies and textbooks and workbooks to use, and it kind of just really spoiled our love of learning at that point, and really just didn't make school enjoyable, and it was impossible to merge two really different philosophies together. So we eventually left that school and joined another school. So I made a mistake. The first school was not the county school, it was the district school. The second school that we joined was actually the county school, but the formula was basically the same, and after 6 months we left and we went through the private school route so that we could homeschool independently without any oversight, without any materials. We could purchase whatever materials we wanted, and we just reported directly to the state. And that worked really, really well for a few years. And at that point, we could really kind of immerse ourselves in the Waldorf philosophy. Now, back when we first started homeschooling, we were asked a lot why we homeschooled, and amongst our religious community, stating that we wanted just more religion in our curriculum was pretty obvious, but to turn our backs on a really good public school system just didn't make sense to a lot of people. And a lot of questions about socialization came up and about academics, and at the time, in order to to explain why we wanted to homeschool, we kind of had to knock the public school system a little bit. And I don't think that that's a fair way to make any kind of decisions or to share why you are doing something different than the public school system, whether it's a private school or homeschool or private tutors or whatever it is. You may illuminate some of the challenges that are in that other system, or if you had an actual problem in that school, then certainly that could be a reason why you decide to homeschool. But as a huge supporter of the public school educational system, I don't want to just say, well, there's this and this and this and this wrong with it, therefore we're going to homeschool. But at the beginning, and when I was still kind of new to homeschooling, a lot of the negative side of public school came into my arguments about why we wanted to homeschool. So when the socialization question came up, and it did come up a lot, and it's a valid question because the school system, or school in general, is a very social environment. And you may doubt that, or you may argue that no, they're there to learn, but the whole environment is a social environment. And if you talk to teachers, you'll find that one of the biggest challenges, or the thing that they spend the most time learning, is classroom management, because that is all about social interactions and keeping the class moving together and listening and not arguing and just paying attention to the teacher and doing their work and following directions. And all of that is a social environment. So the academics are actually quite small, but they are definitely significant. And it's the same in a homeschool setting. If you are homeschooling, then you know that a lot of what you're doing during the day is parenting, which is exhausting, and a lot of times the academics can be really enjoyable. So when the social question came up, my answer was, well, what kind of socialization do you want for your kids? And sometimes when the person who was asking the question thought about it a little bit more deeply, they did realize that sometimes the social skills that students are learning in a group setting aren't always the most desirable. And so the idea that you could control your social setting and those social interactions seemed a little bit appealing. Now, it's not that you can't have successful children, whether they are public schooled, private schooled, or homeschooled. You certainly can. You can certainly have students that fall through the cracks in any system. And so sometimes bringing to light the negative aspects of any one kind of educational system is really not fair in deciding what you actually want to do. So now that I have been homeschooling for a while, I really realized that some of the reasons why we are still homeschooling are actually a little bit different than the reasons why we started out homeschooling. So one of the biggest things I have come to understand, or just this aha moment about our journey and about myself and about my kids, is that I feel like I homeschooled primarily for me. And that seems odd and kind of weird, and so I'd like to explain. I felt that whether you homeschool or send your kids to public school, or you send your children to private school, you are going to deal with a certain set of challenges, and there are going to be pros and cons to each of those different educational systems. And it is my belief that no matter what, children are able to succeed, and whatever system they're in, they want to succeed, they want to do well, and you can have children that do excellent in any kind of academic setting, whether it's public school, private school, homeschool, a tutor, co-op classes, small classes, a la carte classes, any kind of setting, unschooling too. You're going to have students that are going to succeed. So what I mean by I homeschool for me is that I felt that if I'm looking at the challenges of public school and the challenges of homeschool, I felt that I was better equipped to handle the challenges of homeschool. And that's what I mean by I homeschooled for me, because I truly believe that most students, if they are healthy, like there's no medical issues or learning disabilities, it is my belief that most students will do well in pretty much any academic setting. So why take on the challenge of homeschooling? I really think that the reason why I kept at it for so long and why I've really come to enjoy it deeply is because I feel better equipped to handle the challenges related to homeschooling more than the challenges related to public school or to private school. And that is the main reason why we continue to homeschool, with the two sub-reasons, or close second reasons, which continue to be academic freedom and adding more religious content to our curriculum. So academic freedom for me means that we can choose the curriculum that best suits all of our needs, that we can choose the books and the resources and the kits and the projects however we see fit, and that we can choose our time according to the projects and the curriculum that we want to do. So we may choose to do a lot of hands-on projects, and that would take up a lot of our school day, which may not always be possible in a public school setting. Or we may choose to turn our schedule completely upside down and homeschool in the afternoons, which is kind of really different than the public school system. Or we may choose to homeschool on the weekends and take Tuesday and Wednesdays off. You can get really creative when you're homeschooling, and I think that embracing those freedoms is what truly makes homeschooling so enjoyable for so many people, and it's truly enjoyable for me as well. So those are the reasons why we started out homeschooling and the reasons why we continue to homeschool. Of course, I would love to hear why you homeschool, and hey, if you don't homeschool, I would love to hear your reasons why you don't homeschool. I think that would be a really interesting discussion that we could have down in the comment section. Alright, so if you want to check out some of my other homeschooling videos, I've left a couple of videos here for you to enjoy. And if you are curious to see what our homeschool looks like on a daily basis, you can find me on Instagram at Pepper and Pine.